Perfect. Here we go.
Today I want to talk about a topic that I've addressed in plenty of reviews before, but I think deserves its own video at this point. Because as one of the most obnoxious design decisions implemented in recent memory, I feel like the inane influx of walking in modern games can't be derided enough. If there's anything that brings a title to a crashing halt while severely hampering its replayability at the same time, it would have to be segments where control is wrestled away from the player. Where one is forced to hold forward on the controller as characters talk or something whoa awe-inspiring happens. Gotta slow the player down so they can see all the work that was put in. I'm not talking about games that are pretty much 100% story focused, more so action titles or games with fully featured character builds slamming on the brakes. I can't say for sure where this trend began, but it feels like the primary catalyst was the start of the 7th generation of consoles, where games like Gears of War would feature the odd bit of plodding around in between shootouts, a design decision that grew over time to include so many of the action titles released in the following years. I get the feeling the use of this trope is mostly defended by a quote-unquote enlightened segment of the gaming audience, that sees cutscenes as a poor use of the medium and that all titles should aim to be interactive all the time, and that's why being forced to walk about is a great way of telling the story. I too prefer it if a game always lets me be in control, but that's why I prefer cutscenes and abhor the use of these unskippable walkie-talkie wanky sections. Cutscenes are on the whole usually skippable, and if I want to be back in the game, I can do that very quickly. Rarely do walking segments have skip buttons, which means that instead of being able to jump straight to the section with actual gameplay, you're stuck waiting around, dilly-dallying until the fun starts up again. This can be tolerable on the first playthrough, but absolutely kills the replay value of a title. Because while I can skip on through and enjoy the gameplay by jumping over cutscenes, walking about has no appeal a second time around when I already know what's going to happen and I'm just waiting to get back into the action. They're just low-budget cutscenes that fake being part of the gameplay by providing a small modicum of control. But it's usually just a character stumbling about or talking to another NPC. If a game is going to have a story with characters, cutscenes are a much more efficient way of doing that than two awkward models stumbling around each other. It can rock to see characters interacting in dynamic ways before the gameplay kicks back in and it's time to go to town on a cocky boss, for example. I rarely see any of these segments do anything a skippable cutscene couldn't have accomplished better. Because even when a sense of peril is thrown into the mix, it's obvious the player is in very little danger when everything around is scripted and control of the character's actions is so limited. Every time it's done, I can't help but feel it's some misguided attempt to preserve immersion by preventing the player from doing anything wacky or out of character for the protagonist. A voice rings out from the game. "Sit down and let us have more control over this part of the game. Your input is unneeded here, for this is a great dramatic scene where two characters look at each other." Seriously, some of the best narratives ever produced in the video game medium have been in titles that have given the player complete control. James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2 can run whenever he wants, but at no point in that game was I like, "What have you done? I can run. My immersion is ruined."
You think I can take this seriously? How can they do this? This game is a joke. A joke. Think this is art now?
Even when it's not strictly walking, segments where a player character has to wait around for some NPC in the environment to do something can be just as aggravating. I'm playing as some super killer all about going fast and kicking ass, but sorry, the door needs opening by someone else, I guess. Video games. Now, it can be argued that a lot of these moments probably mask the odd bit of loading from time to time, which is possible. I mean, I'd rather the game just load using something like a longer hallway I can still mess around in. Even just a cool piece of art being displayed is preferable to me at least though, than getting grabbed by the collar and being forced to hold down up, with my control over the character's abilities being revoked. Even if I'm just waiting for the next part of the game, I want to be able to mess around and use my tools within the environment. This stuff is boring. Could manage the resources so the game doesn't have to load by slowing down the player like this, if that were the issue. I mean, you know, it's been done. I'm pretty sure I've played games for years where this wasn't a problem, if it is a problem. I'm just guessing here because if the word loading doesn't appear on the screen, then who knows what the game's doing behind the scenes. Stemming from gaming's new propensity to want cinematic qualities, I always get this niggling feeling that these titles are just trying to merge narrative and gameplay in a clunky way that technically preserves interactivity while still being scripted and forced, because it doesn't want the player's full control of a character to ruin totally important story beat, guys. This is serious. Pay attention. Don't let the player mess up this scene by being in full control or anything. But screw that. Sections of play should be treated as such. There's a certain purity to a title that doesn't concern itself with this show-stopping tedium. If a character needs to talk over the gameplay, just let him talk over the gameplay. I can deal with this, I can do two things at once. Nothing brings my enjoyment of a game to a screeching stop more than a character slowing to nearly a standstill. On the other hand, nothing feels cleaner and smoother than booting up a level and playing through it from start to finish, getting to mess around with my abilities in any corridor or section of the level I want to right up until the finish line, where with any luck I can then just jump straight into the next stage. Any cutscene that appears hopefully being a button press away from letting me jump back in. When I'm forced to pace about with weights on my feet in an otherwise action-heavy title, the only walking I'm going to want to be doing is back to the shop to return the game. I understand that not every studio can afford epic cutscenes all the time, so sometimes budget is an issue here. But it's like still, if more of these things were skippable, I probably wouldn't have such a big problem. And I think skipping options is something any game can provide. Oh, but that shouldn't be allowed, because they're totally real gameplay. But they're not. At their core, all they really are awkward, lazy, unskippable cutscenes. And if you're gonna give me a cutscene, you might as well make it the real deal.
Moving allows you to go in many exciting directions.